I'm here to talk about how I use MIDI controllers when I develop Flash applications. It all started out with me having this MIDI controller lying around. It looks like this, unless you can see it. I had this MIDI controller lying around, and I was planning to use it for doing music, but it actually turns out I didn't do that much music. So it kind of annoyed me, and then I remembered a session I saw once with a guy having these faders all around the stage, kind of manipulating configurations, runtimes to figure out how things should look. And well, the idea I got was that if I could somehow read the values from the MIDI controller into Flash, then I would be able to, when I was developing Flash, I could actually manipulate the values instead of having to close down the application, change something, and then run it again, so constantly recompiling. So it turns out with a small socket server that one of my friends actually coded called Socky, it was actually just a few lines of code, and I was able to do it. So I'll just show you how I use it. So for this primitive demo, I have made just like a very simple sound visualizer. So it runs something like this, with basically no audio. Yes, thanks. So, I mean, you know how it is. You do something visually or anything, and you want to kind of tweak the values. So in this case, I just assign, like when I turn the knob on this one, on the MIDI controller, I can kind of control the blurring effect, or I can control something like the colors. So I could actually kind of work with my visual until I liked how it looked, and then I just figure out that's the way I want it, and not having to recompile all the time. Something else I really use it for a lot is for doing like 3D setups. You all know how it is, how tedious it is to figure out where the camera position should be, and you have some layout from a designer and you're trying to match it. So, well, if you assign the x-axis and y and z for like MIDI knobs, then it's pretty easy to actually just play around and figure out how you like it. So, and I mean, yeah, what I wanted to say was, actually, the last thing I've also used it for a lot is actually using the pad for like navigation or triggering functions. So in this presentation, I've been doing navigation. So instead of putting like dummy buttons, okay, I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
Data. I'm a multimedia designer. I work for CNN.com. Work with a bunch of talented creators and try and give their stories a bit more weight with graphics. Do illustrations, maps, and graphs on pretty tight deadlines, often an hour to a day. But when I get a lot more time, I like to make data more friendly, and that's me being friendly. This is a recent thing I've worked on. It's a mashup of data from various organisations. It shows energy consumption per continent and how much of that comes from renewable sources. I really like the kind of oddities that show up in this type of thing. I feel it adds a lot more depth to the story when you actually research them. The first thing that we noticed was that Central and South America, oddly, are the biggest users of renewable fuels, between 80 and 90% over the 30 years. Alarm shit. And the second thing that we really interested us was, where is it? Eurasia, which is mostly Russia, is the only continent, if you can just about see it, over a period that actually dramatically decreases the amount of power it uses. Looked into it, and we think this is due to quite a lot of privatisation around '89 and obviously massive political change. Another thing I'm really proud of this year, I worked on with a bunch of people, developers, architects, and this guy Ken, who decided that he'd like to be in my presentation as a pirate, was the World Cup Twitter buzz that we did over the tournament. Basically, we decided we wanted to track all of the trends across the entire tournament, refreshing every like 10 seconds, looking only for World Cup related tweets. We found that people kept on coming back to this. It wasn't just one of those things that you go and look at. It was something that people would come and sit and watch tick through every 10 seconds about what people were really talking about in the World Cup. Obviously, there was a fuckload of data that we needed to get in if we were storing this. Had to liaise with Twitter for ages about it, but they were really kind in the end and provided us unlimited access to everything we wanted. As you can imagine, that amount of data threw up a hell of a lot of anomalies again. The biggest one, when we turned it on, we were half watching this, desperately hoping it wasn't going to crash, which it did with being Twitter. And half watching the match, and then one of these squares suddenly just started growing and it said bees. And like, well, that's nothing to do with football. And then it wasn't until someone said turn the TV up, and then it's like, oh shit, it's those fucking buzzing vuvuzelas. So yeah, we had loads of great things like that. We couldn't get rid of Shakira off of it for some reason. Don't know why she kept cropping up. But anyway, what I'd like to say is, yeah, just research those data points and they'll lead you in some interesting places. Thanks, I've been Matt.
Today I'm going to talk about the Doomsday Console. So tracing, we all do it. It's our primary means of debugging. Who here hasn't traced something like, fuck, just a sec, check if a function is called. But simply tracing isn't really enough though when you're making something really complex. You need some sort of filtering or some mechanism so you can dig through a ton of messages, get the stuff you need, take it back to your code so you can recompile and test again and again and again and again and again. It's incredibly boring. So wouldn't it be nice to have all that rich trace output but be able to, try changes before you actually commit them back to code? So video game developers often make what's called a developer console, which is a combined logger and command line interface that runs in the background of your application, and you can call it up with a keystroke or a password sometimes. So a typical console will give you detailed logging, but also the ability to call commands on your application to change its properties. So for a game, for instance, you could have a cheat code giving you infinite lives or something. Web developers have Firebug, which does a lot of this stuff. What about us? The Doomsday Console is a developer console for Flash. It started as a logger about a year ago, and it's grown a lot since then. It allows you access to your application like it's a file system, so you can browse the display tree, read and change properties, call methods, and just hack your application. Commands are core to it. They basically let you call any method in your application directly from the command line, which lets you do things like interact with your backend even though there's no front end yet, which is really powerful during early development. Here's a bad video. Some of it. Notice the autocomplete, which is really crap. Context sensitive. Grabbing a sprite on the stage, grabbing this graphics object, drawing a rectangle on it, and then using some of the built-in utilities in the console for manipulating it. Console has a lot of this kind of utility just for measuring or just interactively changing properties, so you don't have to go through the command line all the time. Awesome. And this stuff takes one code to implement in your application. It doesn't mess with it or anything. It just sits there and passes the reads properties until you actively make changes. So low risk. Open source. Small community right now. Hopefully there's going to be a lot more of us. Super nerdy. A lot of people look at it and just go like, what? It's a lot of fun to work with them. It's like the most fun way of working with tracing. You can just put it that way. Working on 2.0, which is just like a huge UX overhaul. It's kind of crazy, actually. So check it out, please. If you got any questions, whatever, hit me up. Bother me on Twitter or whatever.
Alright, hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a Flasher. Before I tell you about Moonshine, I'm quickly going to show some stuff I've worked on in the past, like the IKEA Flash framework, the Complete National Geographic, which is an air app containing 120 years worth of Nat Geo issues. And I've got 2 iPhone apps up on the App Store. Both are free. The guy on the left there is Paul Holiday, who helped make the Android app for Flash on the Beach. Enough about that. Moonshine is a middleweight IDE for ActionScript and Flex development. We're 4 people who worked on it for roughly a year. Let's have a look at it. When you open Moonshine, you get a splash screen where you can access recently opened files and projects, create new files and projects from templates, and we switch to that background art every new release. It's not really that horrible. The colors are a bit off. So this is Moonshine during normal usage. You got your source view, project view, and at the bottom we have a console where we handle most of the input and output needed, so we don't get a lot of pop-ups in the application. Moonshine is written in ActionScript Flex 4, runs on top of Eric 2.0, and the entire thing is open source. It's about 25,000 lines of code, and we're trying to keep it as small as possible. We've written our own source editor from scratch using Flash text engines, so we get really good rendering speeds and good looking typography. We currently have syntax highlighters for ActionScript, MXML, HTML, CSS, XML, and JavaScript. From inside Moonshine, you can compile, debug, and version control your projects. We're working on auto-completion based on the Flex PMD parser. It says it's going to be in Java, but we can't backport it to ActionScript. We just don't think it will be fast enough. So .7 added subversion support. .8 is estimated to be around 2-3 months out, same for .9. And at 1.0, we hope to be a drop-in replacement for Flash Builder. So you can get Moonshine, both binaries and source, at thewaxup.com. If you want to help out, you'll find my contact details at thewaxup.com/Eric. So that's download at thewaxup.com. If you want to help out, thewaxup.com/Eric. That's all for me. Please give a big round of applause for the next guy.
Okay, so Flash Magazine, we're an independent news site dedicated to the Flash platform and the Flash community. And we've been going for 10 years now, which is kind of interesting because what it gives you is a bit of perspective over the news over that period. Because we've got posts going way, way back to 2000. And the thing I find is we tend to dwell on the same things again and again. You know, particularly competitors. I mean, competitors are one of these people that we, you know, at the moment we're thinking, you know, Apple and HTML5, but there's a history of this all the way back. So that can be amusing to dig through the archives a little bit and give you a little bit of a history of Flash killers, because there's been a lot of these over the years. And see if any of these ring a bell. This one? But it is actually helpful. Actually, a lot of this went on in the early days. Adobe used to sue Macromedia. They spent so much money on this. Macromedia, Adobe, they were in court all the time. Any Corel Rave users? No? Didn't think so. And there was a point where maybe Macromedia were going to get on Microsoft, and that was a bit of a worry, but that disappeared as well. But it's good to have a competitor. It's healthy, actually. I mean, it means that you will, you've got something to up your game. You know, you've got to play the game a little bit. So, yeah, that's not good there. But you have to remember why we do this. I mean, Flash does things that other things don't do, and that's why we do it. And it's really powerful. And news like this gets me out of bed in the morning. I mean, we've been on Flash for 10, on mobile for 10 years. You know, everybody moans about performance, but I mean, you try and run it on a Compaq, and it's like a whole world of pains. RAs, paper vision, I mean, this stuff's stunning, and this is why we do what we do. So, you know, it's a C64 emulator in Maine, and like, dude, jeez. And then phone calls, Aviary. But we're a plugin, and you have to remember that, and you have to kind of deal with these things. And I think we are trying, as a community, we do come together very well to try and solve these problems. We've fixed the back button, we're searchable, we are trying, and I think Adobe as a company are trying to open up as well. And there's a lot of openness here. I mean, how you define open is a whole different question, and that's half an hour in itself. So I think, you know, we're trying as a community, we're trying to bring it together. And we're strong, and we do some great stuff. So I think what I really want to do is thank everybody who's contributed over the years, because we've had some fantastic contributors, and especially Jens for getting us going. He's an amazing guy. Yeah, that's me. Thanks, guys.